Have you ever solved a puzzle in a game or beaten a boss with a convoluted strategy and thought, yeah, how was I supposed to know that? What about walked into a trap around some random corner and thought, yeah, okay, buddy, I remember not to walk around next time? Like, what lesson did that teach me? To save more often? To follow a walkthrough? Bullshit difficulty is a hallmark of old ass games. Ever played an NES game? I'm willing to bet you had to follow a walkthrough. Nintendo 64 game? Unless your older brother walked you through it when you were a kid and the back of your brain remembers it better than your exams, you probably have no clue about what's going on.
Dude, I'm like 8 hours in and I have no idea what I'm doing. That's a joke. I love Ocarina of Time.
Every time I play Ocarina of Time, it's like I enter a trance. I remember everything, down to the fire arrows in Lake Hylia, and just about every heart piece. How the hell do I remember that? There seems to be this expectation that you have access to these random pieces of knowledge, and you probably wouldn't pre-internet. So you'll just spend 2 hours running around and trying everything in your power to move on, till you just so happen to interact with the thing that gives you a lame-ass riddle that isn't even a puzzle. It's just a set of instructions with not 100% clear nouns. Okay, smartass, I'll remember to interact with every item next time. Like, that's difficulty. Or, I'm figuring something out. It applies to cheap combat too. Ever fought a boss and thought, was I meant to kill it like that? Metal Gear suffers from this problem with a lot of its fights. Olga and Metal Gear Rex at least felt like that to me, where I was just stuffing rations down my gullet until I beat the boss. Is being pushed to exploiting a game difficulty, or is it just a knowledge check, or is it both? Probably, but damn, does it feel cheap? And there's some other side of combat where an enemy will turn around and you'll see a big yellow glowing spot, and again, is that difficulty? Kids play red light, green light. I play Ocarina of Time, and we're both identifying when the colors change. Difficulty settings are also dumb. As soon as you start losing too often, you'll think, am I missing something? Am I out of my league? Do I just need to get good? Games like Halo are awful offenders of this sort of cheap playstyle at high difficulties. Halo 2 particularly forcing you to play in a hyper-specific way to get through the game with a semblance of sanity. Like, I know that's the point, but is my capacity to wait behind a wall a measure of how good I am at a game? Probably not, and it feels cheap to play as well. Like a challenge for challenge's sake, rather than for the enjoyment and development. Shovel Knight is one of those games that slowly walks you through its difficulty. Its mechanics are intuitive, and the game gradually incorporates multiple mechanics at once, testing each one as you go. Never once did I feel cheated. Every death felt like my own fault, which is really impressive. This all without a difficulty slider, but I always felt sufficiently challenged. This exact thing applies to, well, most platformers actually, but I love Shovel Knight, and I want an excuse to play it, so here we are. Yeah, look at that gameplay. GTFO was also a great example of this. The game is difficult, but you always get the feeling that any given encounter was winnable, particularly at your skill level of the game, given how its rundowns work in regards to unlocking lower tiers. The game dramatically and dynamically increases difficulty. It's not like GTFO can't feel cheap, but there always seems to be a risk that you took or a caution you didn't that was your downfall. Certainly there are occasions where it would have been easier had you known the map, for example, but these are less often than not. One of the most classic difficulty sliders in video games is hardcore mode, but depending on your game, this is either the most frustrating or most boring difficulty. Have you ever done a hardcore Minecraft run? It involves sleeping through the night and strip mining for 2 hours, then racing to the end of the game, in at least most players' experience, myself included. I feel the same about Valheim. Since enemy damage increases and the map disappears, the game becomes role dependent, and every combat encounter when you first enter an area is more slow than thrilling. Are you willing to wait for your potion cooldown or until you're dry? Are you willing to leave to go get arrows? It slows what is already a really well-paced game down to a crawl. A game with very good difficulty settings is a little game called RoboQuest, where you slowly step your way up in difficulties, but you can go back down whenever you want, and it's just for a short run. When you get a godly build, you manage to punch much further above your weight, and when you get a bad build, you can re-roll into a decent build, but even if you don't, there's an expectation that you lose because of bad luck. Oh well, on to the next run. Even then, the highest difficulty level is very reasonable, but S ranking this difficulty, a self-imposed challenge, is the actual challenge, which is really difficult to do. Noita is a game that wants to tear you apart. Your first run will be a matter of seconds. Your next may be a few minutes until you're confidently building wands, doing side quests, and traveling to parallel worlds. It's a game where your understanding of the world is the difficulty setting, which is a really interesting concept. Every run feels winnable despite the random generation, and particularly as you get better, usually a risk or bad judgment is the thing that gets you killed. Sometimes it does feel a bit like bullshit, but you'll rarely be fooled twice. Even Left 4 Dead will change the amount of enemies or resources depending on how well or poorly you're performing, even disregarding the difficulty setting. The system is called the Director, and it's one of the more famous aspects of the game, particularly in recent years, being one of the many things that makes it replayable, at least in my experience. A lot of games have a very similar system that pushes good players and helps weaker players. So, games can work with dynamic difficulty, in which the game increases and decreases difficulty as the player gets better or worse. Optional difficulty, in which the player can choose to make things more difficult or less difficult, either by going through optional routes or selecting the difficulty. And games that have stationary difficulty can absolutely work very well as well. There isn't a one-size-fits-all approach to the concept of difficulty, but there are some times where games get it wrong. Artificial difficulty is when a game doesn't do anything to actually challenge the player. It wastes your time and makes the player feel as if something's happening when nothing really is. Whenever a boss is immune to every status effect in the game, or a well-planned strategy or combo in an RPG, whenever an event throws hundreds of trash mobs at you that slow you down but don't really challenge you in an FPS, or even a bullet spongy enemy, they all just waste the player's time. Very rarely do they actually make the player get better at the game. These examples exist throughout multiple good games that usually have good difficulty in most ways, but that doesn't mean they always have good difficulty. Just because a game is difficult doesn't mean its difficulty is bad. Just because a game isn't difficult doesn't mean its difficulty is bad. Just because a game makes you think that it's difficult doesn't mean that it's actually good difficulty. Games with poor balance originate from the arcade era fairly regularly. Limited lives, threats that you can't see coming or don't know the power of, limited player choice to deal with scenarios, and we still see the lame-ass trickle-down of these stinky-ass systems to this day, but we have produced way cooler ways to do difficulty, and given players of all skill level the ability to enjoy games, and not just the ones with $100 to put into a coin slot, which I think is pretty cool. Hi, thank you so much for watching the video. If you heard this sound all throughout the video,
Because of this little bastard right here. Can I have a nod? Can you give me a nod? Can you nod? Good boy.
yeah, he kept on screaming throughout the video. Anyway, don't forget to like and subscribe, and if you are going to leave a comment, which I would appreciate, give me some feedback, or even tell me your favorite game based on its difficulty. Is it one that you can pick your difficulty? Is it one that just has a difficulty that you enjoy? Anyway, thank you.
Oh, this is non-truffle. Oh, lightning bolt non-truffle. Yeah, fuck it. Oh my god. Oh. Okay.